Hello and welcome. In the first two videos, I talked about how the backend and frontend are connected to each other. Now, the interesting part over here is how we can develop our codes, or the question comes that where we can write the codes. So in order to do that, let me just bring you to a part where we can talk about, where and how we can do that. There are various tools, those are available, and we can use those tools to code. Let me just give you a brief idea about what tools are there in the market that you can use for free to develop your application. In the first part, we talked about um, how the front end, and then the second part, the back end, are connected. This is what we talked about. Now, to write the codes, we need certain tools. And why are the tools important? There is one thing that you might be familiar with. It's called as Notepad. Okay. You straight away go to Notepad and start writing your codes over here. And still the codes will work. And you can see whatever the codes written on the Notepad can be seen on the browser level. Interesting, isn't it? So no problem. Okay. We can write the codes in the Notepad, and we can just run the piece of code over here. If we save it by a particular extension that is called HTML, then we can see our codes. And you must be thinking about, is that so simple? And I'm saying, yeah, it is so simple. The problem is if you have certain ideas about languages, like there are languages like C and C++, and you might have heard about Java, and then JavaScript, and many more languages. Okay, it is so obvious for you to think, because you have certain ideas about the languages and certain big things regarding them, like about coding part and those kind of things, and absolutely no idea where to write the codes. But we should start from the beginning over here. Like there is a thing called as HTML, and you can write the codes inside the Notepad. Now, these three languages are different languages, okay? You don't use Java writing the codes inside HTML. It's a different language. It's not used for making the web browser, okay? I'm sorry, it's not a code that's written somewhere to be reflected on the web browser. But JavaScript is, because it's the language that a browser understands. So if you want to see something in the browser, you should know JS. In short, it is called as JS. Okay. So the thing is that we need certain things like HTML and like JS. For a beginner, he might also think that HTML and JS, HTML is also a language, JS is also a language. HTML is not a language. Okay. And we will see it during our series why HTML is not a language, but JS is. Okay. But for now, it's very important for you to understand that you need the understanding of one language, that is JS, and almost all the apps that you see on the web is made using JS, JavaScript. The backend that we talked about, the backend So there are two separate ends, okay? The front end uses this, and the back end can use Java. As I talked about, the back end can use Java as a language. And let's say Node.js. So again, you see, it's JS, okay? So it's like a Node.js. The same thing for backend development. When you do a front-end development, you can see the effect then and there. Like, just do it and see the effect, what you have made. But for the backend development, you can't see it. It's for the backend developers to do. The backend developers obviously can, but it is done in a separate environment, okay, in a very safe environment. These codes are written. So at the starting, what we are concerned with is the front-end development part, and very slowly we will move into the back-end part, okay? Now, the question is, if you want to develop an app on the front end, what tools will you be needing? So one tool is my simply Notepad. You can write the codes in the Notepad and see the effect. But there are other tools as well in the market that can help you develop the app. In order to develop SAP-related apps, okay, SAP. So there's a tool called as WebIDE. You can do the same thing in the WebIDE, okay? And there's another one that's called as Visual Studio Code. And there's another one that's called as SAP BTP. See that? Now, let me just show you in a different slide this particular thing. Rub certain parts of the piece. So let me just rub all of it and show it again. The tools. So the first tool that we have is Notepad. And then we have the SAP WebIDE. And then we have got the VS Code. And then we have our SAP BTP. Now, there are more, a lot of them are there. But for development of SAP-related apps, we can use any of the three. For development of, let's say, websites, if you want to only develop websites, you can use either Notepad, not at all recommended. I'll tell you why. You can do that. You can use VS Code. You can also use WebIDE for it, but VS Code is the best choice for it. Why? It takes no time to download. It takes only around 2 to 5 minutes to download, and you can start working on it. You have got so many plugins also inside it, but which you can use for developing even the SAP-related apps. Specifically for SAP, you need WebIDE. For developing SAP-related apps, the front-end apps I'm talking about. In the SAP BTP, again, a different kind of a framework, a different kind of a platform. I won't say it is a framework, I'll say it's a platform where you can develop your front end, back end, database, everything over here in the same SAP BTP. It's a big platform, big landscape. So we will be talking about this off and on, but not right now because it's a big thing actually. So, if you are interested in going to the SAP world, because mostly I'll be talking about the SAP related apps and those things. So you need to have SAP Web IDE. You need to know how to work on SAP Web IDE or SAP BTP. Okay, if you really want to land a job, if you simply want to make a website and then host it in some kind of a environment, then you simply need a Notepad or a VS Code. But since Notepad is not recommended, VS Code is. Can we develop SAP-related apps in the VS Code? Yes, we can. Even for the SAP-related apps, we can use VS Code. Even for simply learning languages, we can use JavaScript, we can use VS Code. It's a versatile app, very good app, very good. I won't say it's an app. Oh yeah, it is sort of an app where you can write code. So it's something for you to, it's an app for you to write codes. So it's a platform where you can write code. So why do we prefer Notepad over these? The reason is VS Code comes packed with certain help, which you won't get over here. Let's say you want to write something, you're writing a code over here. Let's say you write a doc, like we do in HTML. So each of the lines of codes you have to write all by yourself. Okay, but when you use the doc in VS Code, it will give you a list of things by just pressing an enter. So you don't have to do a lot of labor writing VS Code because VS Code knows, what could be the next. The simple things, those have to be there, and that could be just provided by VS Code. Not even Web IDE does that. It does it to some extent, but VS Code does it to a large extent. So we'd be using VS Code. And again, I'm saying specifically Web IDE is also important because here you can save your apps inside the Web IDE. So you don't have to make another folder and save your apps somewhere. Here you can directly launch your app or put your app in the server. That is called as deployment. Okay. So many functionalities are there in SAP Web IDE. So we will be using Web IDE for SAP related works. But interestingly, when we start making these apps in SAP Web IDE or VS Code or whatever, one thing we have to pass through is how to make a website first. The first step is you should know how to make a website, for which we'll be using HTML and JavaScript and CSS. In order to learn HTML, it will take around, just to get a hang of it, 2 to 3 days. Okay, just to understand how the thing works, how the things work in it. So not a big deal about HTML, very easy thing. But, it's like simply working on, like a thing called as the Word, if you have worked on, or Excel or anything like something like that. But at the same time, when you get a hang of Excel, you have to learn, different ways to, do the things. Even if you learn to know if you have learned to work on Word, Microsoft Word, then you need to increase your knowledge of different kinds of tools those are available. So, but then the basic system of HTML you will understand in 2 to 3 days. JavaScript, because it's a programming language, it's a language, it will take you 2 to 3 months actually. 2 to 3 months to get a hang of it. So it will take a lot of time. CSS again is part of HTML. So again, just to get a hang of it, it will just take again 2 to 3 days. Okay, not a big deal. even jQuery, not a lot of time is required, but for JavaScript, it will take a lot of time. Okay. So once you understand these things, because these things are only required to make a website, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, jQuery. These things are required to make a website. Now, where are we going to make a website? You can use the VS Code to make a website. So once your website is completely ready, it could be deployed to a server space that will be given by any server space that you buy. That we will not see. What we will see basically is that how to make a page of a website, complex websites, just to give a hang of it. And after that, you can use ChatGPT that will fasten your efforts not less than 30, 40 times. Okay, so ChatGPT is a great help. You can only use ChatGPT for coding when you have a hang of what you're doing. If you don't understand what you're doing, how will you use ChatGPT? What will you ask ChatGPT to do for you? Okay, then that's a problem. Don't take JavaScript lightly. It's a very, very important thing because this is what we're going to extend it into the SAP Web IDE for developing SAP graded applications. Okay. So because our path is something like this. Our path is first we'll start doing simple HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And slowly you'll move into, you can do that. Where we'll write the codes? We can write the codes in VS Code. You can write the codes in the VS Code. Later on, the second part will switch over Web IDE. Why Web IDE? Because if you are interested in SAP related things, then we can switch to Web IDE. Then after, once you understand Web IDE and SAP related stuff, we can also switch to SAP BTP. You see the roadmap, how we are going to learn everything step by step. So this is our third step. It's a big thing. I told you why SAP BTP is a big thing. Even if you know this part, Web IDE, and know to develop apps, you can get a job as a front-end developer. Even if you know this, you can get a job of a website developer, right? So it depends upon what you want. The thing is that if you really want to invest a lot of time and try to understand things, and then see, this will take a lot of time, of course, because Jace is there. So you have to take a lot of time to do that. So, of course, I think 6 months. Same is for this one, 6 months. Depends upon. So why not to learn this thing, SAP Web IDE, because that opens up a lot of scope for, entering into SAP BTP and getting into the front end and back end. Okay, so this scope is bigger. This scope is bigger than this, way bigger than this one. So it depends upon where you want to land yourself into. But we have to deal with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then we will move into this. If you don't want to go to this part, just want to stay over here. Fine, it's okay. You can develop websites. If you have interest in developing websites, you can develop websites, good ones, and still you can get a job over here too, or website developer. But then again, you need to spend a lot of time understanding different aspects of it, how to, make a website look great and very prepossessing, and people look for those kind of people who have, you know, who have skills in developing websites. Okay, so of course you can use your innovative skills into it and do that. Okay. Now there is another thing. There's another thing that's called as a framework. Framework. What is a framework? So if you're working on SAP Web IDE, let's say, so you'll be using the framework for developing SAP related apps. SAP related apps. Okay. So there you can't just simply put HTML type of things inside it, but rather you'll use a framework. Now, what is a framework? It is, in simple words, a sort of help that gives you certain predefined tools to work with. You just can't put your own tools inside it. Okay, predefined tools. You will simply use JavaScript and those kind of things inside it, but at the same time, you should use those tools. The problem in it is that how you're going to use those tools, predefined help tools. How can you use the help? The problem is how to use the help that is given by the framework. You have to learn to make the setups ready so that you can use the predefined tools. So, it's not simply coding. Yeah, I started coding. So if you want to code, JavaScript is there. But then you're going to put the JavaScript in accordance with the tools those are given to you by the framework to work on. There is the view that you actually make, and then you use and on the view you have got certain functions, which we will talk about, don't you worry. But then they have all to be fit inside the framework. So then, for a beginner, it makes the things a bit tougher to understand, the framework stuff. And the framework that we are using is UI5. And it is SAP UI5, we'll say. Framework to build the apps, all right? And don't worry about all these things. You will learn every bit of it. What I've learned over a period of time about computers is that let me just talk about that thing as well. That's very important. Why learning computers is tough? First, my answer is not about this. I found it to be the most toughest and most easiest thing. Most easiest thing, and that'd be like a thing over here. So interestingly, I've used most toughest, and it's already a superlative, and I've used the most just to enhance how tough it is. Okay, and the most easiest because we needed another superlative to make this even more enhanced. The most easiest. And why is that? You know why? Because it's a language. It's a language. You need to understand what I'm saying. It's a language. And here is the real crux that's hidden for understanding these things. Now, when I'm saying it's a language, have you ever seen anybody who's not learned a language? So the answer is anybody can learn a language. Anybody can learn a language. But language learning takes time. That's the most important thing. It takes time. That's it. Nothing more than that. It takes time. And if you don't invest time in it, you won't learn it. So what I found is that, let's say I started working somewhere. First time, what the heck are they talking? What the heck are they saying? You know, when you're referring to any kind of, learning material. The second day, the third day, I say, okay, it's okay. No, I understood it. Although I did not, but then I say, I understand it because, let me just give you one example. Try explaining these things to somebody older, like maybe your father, who is not interested in computers and doesn't want to do that, and try explaining it and just giving search. Tell him this is how you have to do. Go to the start menu, and there you will find somewhere in the bottom part there's a search bar. There's a search bar, and that you can see over here. There's a search bar. This point I'm talking about, search bar. Type folder named Danish. So type Danish, and it will bring you to a folder. Inside the folder, there's a file. Inside the file, just double click it. These kinds of things, it's so tough for somebody who doesn't have any knowledge of computers to stomach. So you'll think, what the heck the person is talking? But when he goes over there and does the same thing 10 times, it becomes, oh my gosh, there wasn't anything to learn about it. So see, the change in the scenario is that the first time it became so tough, but after 10 times, you were thinking, what was the tough thing in it? So which is why I say the most toughest. So if somebody, because you're using a language that has got no sense, go to the switch on the computer. When you switch the computer on, the bottom part that you see is the footer. In the footer, you'll see a search bar. That's this thing. In the search bar, you're going to type Danish, and then you type Danish. You get the access of the folder, and the folder is a file, and those kind of things. Like, so confusing. For God's sake, it's the toughest thing. I don't want to hear it. But if you have done these things, and I expect that you should at least know these things. What I'm talking about. That means you have touched the laptop or a or a desktop or whatever, and you have made your files and folders, those things. You have got very, very basic knowledge of computers. Then you're understanding what I'm saying. Even if you don't have any knowledge of computers, still you can start. There's no problem at all. That's what I think. Now, when I started, what knowledge did I have about computers? Let me just tell you. Copy, paste. I knew typing on the keyboard without looking at it, and knowledge of Word, bit of an Excel, very less knowledge of PPT. Done it. This was the knowledge that I started learning computers with. And so, which is why I can very well understand your problems. Okay, the people who want to learn coding and they have got slightest of idea about it, and so I would be a great help uh, in your way of in your way towards learning these languages. So be sure I can help you. Thanks for watching the video. In the next video, we'll be talking about installing Web IDE and then VS Code. These two. Off and on, I'll also talk about SAP BTP. Okay. Thanks for watching the video.